Hello everybody, and let me apologize in advance because the microphone on this particular document camera seems to be giving me problems. I'm trying to speak softly so I don't cause a lot of reverb, but if it does, I apologize. Okay, this video is about grant writing. So what do we do with grant writing? How does this process get started? All of those things. Grant writing is very important in a lot of people's lives in academia, and the first place to start is that there will be a funding source. So some people only want to apply for certain funding sources. So this is the organization that puts out the call. The call, kind of like a callback or something in Hollywood. Here they're calling and saying, look, you are now able to submit your grant proposals, and we will give you a deadline by which you have to do that. So these people could put out the call for grant proposals. Okay, so in that, there will be all kinds of information, what kind of deadlines there are. There might be multiple deadlines. I'm going to show you my most recent grant that I applied for, and what the RFP looks like for that. And we'll talk about, okay, how do you get these things done? So first of all, they have to put out the call. Different ones call it different things, but normally you'll see it called a request for applications, which is an RFA, or you'll hear it called a request for proposals, which is an RFP. So normally these are the two that you'll hear amongst people who are writing grants and such. There's a special one that the Nsf uses, and I can't remember, oh, here it is. They call it a program solicitation. So other people might use it, but this one seems to be pretty standard across all the Nsf grants that I have seen. So Nsf is the National Science Foundation, and in America they really give you a large amount of funding depending on where you are. So that's what they call it. Okay, what kind of grant we're writing and all of that kind of stuff. I'll talk a tiny bit about that in a minute. Okay, so first they have to put out the request for applications, the request for proposals, whatever they're going to call it. And then what you need to do is you need to make sure that what you're writing, that's the first step. Next is the grant proposal submission. So you need to make sure that what you're writing lines up with what they are asking for. If, for instance, you want to buy computers for your school, and this particular grant proposal or grant application thing is for, let's say, funding graduate assistants, and you tell them, I want your money, but I don't want to fund graduate assistants, I want to buy computers, they are going to tell you no. Okay, so you have to align this with the RFA. I'll just say RFA or RFP, I'll use those interchangeably. You have to align it with what they're saying the goals of their program are, and there will be a section in there where they say, this is why we're doing this, and this is why this money is available, and we really want you to do such and such, and the closer you align it, and the more you say, yes, I'm going to do the things that you want me to do, the more likely you are to get the funding. Okay, now, if you don't do what you say you're going to do, they will probably pull your funding. But so you have to mean what you're going to say. I'm really going to do these things. Okay. So you write your grant proposal submission, and then the next step in that is that it goes through some form of a peer review process. And I mentioned this in yesterday's videos. So let's talk about how that goes. So the peer review process normally goes like this. Once you submit, and different places have different processes, but it generally will go something along like this. You write your application, you submit it, hopefully you hit the due date or else you're not going to get considered for it. And they send that out to 2 different faculty members or staff, depends on what kind of an institution you're working with. But for instance, whenever I apply to the THECB, it's normally their staff members, and they're people who are familiar with what this particular RFA was supposed to be about, and they know what they're looking for. So they send it out to 2 different people, and these people say yes or no. Okay, yes or no. Okay, so here's the deal. If you get 2 people who say yes, you're probably in. Okay, so they're going to look at that and say, hey, we got 2 people who said yes, we like that. It's been reviewed by 2 peers, 2 people who are about the same standing as you are, and they both say yes. And then depending on how many grant proposals they have, how many people have gotten 2 yeses, how many they say they're going to fund. For instance, if they say they're going to fund 10 grants and they have only 8 people with double yeses, then you're probably in. You're probably going to get your money. Yay. Okay. But if you have, say, 10 grants that they're going to fund, and then they have 20 people with double yeses, then the process can be more in-depth, and I'll talk about that in a second. Okay. It's also equally closed if you get 2 no's, right? If you get 2 no's, neither one of the people liked your grant proposal, and so they're probably just going to reject you, and you won't move forward at all. Okay. The weirdness happens whenever you have a plus and a minus. So one person says yes, and one person says no, and now we have a tie. Okay. Usually what will happen with that is they will send it out to a 3rd tiebreaker faculty or staff peer member. Okay, and this person will have, depending on whether they say yes or no, basically they still do the same process, they still use the same rubrics to quote unquote grade you, right? But normally this person has the power. If they say yes, then you move on in the process. If they say no, then you're just done. Okay, so kind of a little weird tiebreaker thing going on there. Okay, so that's that step. What if you have 2 yeses, but they have 20 people in that same category and they're only funding 10? Then they normally will go to some kind of if they'll either narrow it down amongst themselves and argue the merits of each one. Maybe one of the proposals is from a lower socioeconomic area, so they want to fund that one instead of another one, those kinds of things. But if they can't do that, then normally they'll go on to a negotiation stage. Okay, and negotiations are where basically the funding agency will set up meetings. Let me see if I can find a different colored pen that'll show up. Okay, they'll set up meetings, normally a phone call, something like that, and today's day it might be a Zoom meeting, something like that, where they can talk to the person who wrote the grant. Now, normally the person who wrote the grant, it depends again on the grant and how they have it worded, but a lot of times that'll be the PI, is what they call that, which is the principal investigator. It's the person who's responsible for how the money gets spent, and it's a very big responsibility. If you say, I'm going to buy a whole bunch of paper and pens, and you end up buying a laptop, you're going to get in trouble, because technology in general is a limited item. They really want to know when you're spending money on technology. Or if you say you're going to spend it on students, but then instead you take yourself a trip to Tahiti, again, you're going to be in trouble. Okay, sometimes this PI, it might be called the program director, but I've run into problems with that, or the director of the grant, things like that. We've run into problems with program director in particular, because some funding agencies, the program director is what they call, it could be the person in the funding agency who runs that particular grant. So, for instance, you will have one point person that you're in contact with all the time as you're working through your grant, and if so, they might call that person, that point person in their agency, the program director. Okay, so a lot of times you'll hear them call the person at the institution who wrote the grant the director of the grant, or the PI, principal investigator. So those are kind of some of the things that are out there. Alright, the negotiations, they could be easy, they could be difficult. Sometimes if they have 20 proposals and they want to fund all 20 of them, then what they'll do is they'll say, okay, we're going to fund all 20 of them, but at a reduced rate. So if you applied for $200,000, maybe you're only getting $100,000. And so then you have to look at whatever you've put together for your particular grant. And if you had a particular vision in mind, oh, we're going to do this and this and this. For instance, one time I had a grant where we said, well, we're going to bring in all these teachers. It was a teacher quality grant, which is from the state level normally. And we said, we're going to bring in all these teachers from these school districts, and once a month on a Saturday, we're going to feed them lunch. Okay? Now the idea is that if you're there in the location with us, and we're feeding you lunch, we waste less time. You're not out running around, going to find something to eat. You're not traveling back and forth, those kinds of things. And so we can have what's called a working lunch, and normally they'll pay for that. Okay? So it depends on the institution, again, depends on the funding agency, but a lot of times they would pay for that. So we had written that into our grant, and they wanted to fund us, they wanted to fund another grant, so they were trying to make cuts. And basically, our lunches turned into, I believe it was a working breakfast instead, which was basically like continental style breakfast. So they just cut it down. They said, we don't want you to do this, it's too much money. And one time they said, okay, we'll let you do that, but not as often. Okay, so I think instead of a monthly meeting with lunch, we ended up having one at the beginning of the grant and one at the end of the grant, like a big bill. So sometimes they'll do that. Sometimes they'll really cut things and be like, oh, you want to put together a testing center and pay staff to do that? Yeah, we don't want to fund that. So we're just going to completely cut that line item. And if you put a lot of money into that line item, then your grant budget can be greatly reduced that way. So the negotiations, like I said, they can be easy, depends on the funding institution, or they can be very kind of brutal. So that's what goes on with that. Okay, but sometimes even if they know they're going to fund you, they'll still want to go, like even if there were they're funding 10 people and they only have 8 applications that they're going to approve, they'll still want to go through negotiations, because they'll still be like, oh, I think you can cut here, or maybe they just want to talk to you and make sure that your vision is the same as theirs, because you can put stuff in writing, but it's not necessarily the same as what it is whenever you're talking to somebody in real life or over the phone or whatever. So maybe they're just like, oh, we just want to get to know these people and make sure we're going to work well with them, that our personalities click, that kind of thing. So sometimes they do the negotiations no matter what. Alright, next stage. Next stage is, hopefully, funding. Okay, and depending on your institution, this can be a lot of of work or not a lot of work. It depends on whether or not you have a grant office that'll do this, or you might have to work directly with your fiscal, dang it just left me. With your, I want to say, fiscal office. That's what I'm thinking about. Okay, so sometimes, like I wrote one where we were working with Paris Junior College, and they had the director of the grant working directly with their fiscal office to get people paid, to get checks cut, to get things ordered for the grant and stuff like that. They were just like, just come straight to us and talk to us. And basically whatever the grant director said we're going to do, they did, but that way they could just keep a real close eye on the numbers and the money. Okay, so this is where the agency gives you money. Now, depending, I've worked different ways. Sometimes they want you to spend and then do a monthly budget report and then they'll reimburse you. Sometimes they want you to spend for a semester and then they reimburse at the end. And sometimes they just dump money into your account and say, okay, here's the money, you write a report at the end of a quarter and let us know how much you spent. In any case, if you, for instance, have been given $100,000 given to you, there's a couple of things to keep in mind here. One is, again, the principal investigator or the director of the grant is responsible for how that money is spent, and you will be audited, okay? You can just count on being audited multiple times. So, because in general, this is from an outside agency, it might be federal money, it might be state money. They want to make sure that you're not wasting their money, okay? So, $100,000 given to you, $100,000 spent correctly, okay? Remember that. Now the idea though is that when you get down to the end of the year or the period for this grant, whatever it is, if you have only spent $90,000 spent and you don't spend that other $10,000, guess what? That's right, you lose it. Use it or lose it. So the funding agency will ask for a refund, basically. Okay, so most times with a grant, for instance, I've got one going right now, and I have probably about that much money, about $10,000 that I need to spend this summer. I have until August to spend it. I know what I'm spending it on, and basically I have a direct line item in there that's called supplies for faculty, and so I'm looking at different supplies for faculty, pens, pencils, paper. Do you need a headset so that you can make your videos online these days? How does this work? So what do you need? So I'm going to spend that way. But one thing I can tell you for sure is that by August all of my money will be spent, because I certainly don't want them to come back and say, oh, you didn't need that money because you didn't spend that money. So be sure that you use it or you will lose it. Okay, and then, like I said, there will be, depending on the period of the grant, normally you'll get a year-long grant or a 2-year-long grant, something like that. It just depends on the way the RFP was written, but depending on how that is, there will be tons of reports. And that is where you give data back to the funding agency. Okay, so for ours, they want to know our pass rates in certain classes. So for me, at the beginning and end of each semester, I'm having to send them data back so that they know what we're doing. It could be reports that are in the form of site visits. Okay, that's whenever an evaluator comes to you. These could be internal evaluators, such as somebody from the agency, or they could be external evaluators, which is just people that they know understand their philosophy, and so they send them out. I was once evaluated by, it was actually somebody I knew, but they were a principal at a local public school who happened to know that particular grant agency and how they worked, and the agency was like, hey, we'll pay you a little bit of money if you'll go evaluate this site and see if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, basically. It's just a little check to make sure. And then usually there's some kind of annual, both expense report and progress report. So the progress report tells them, hey, we've done X, Y, and Z, and we're looking good, or we need this help, that kind of thing. There are other reports you can fill out. Sometimes if you want to move some money in the budget addendums, things like that, changes to the budget. If you want to do that, a lot of times you have to do reports. So there is a lot of that kind of stuff going on. There's probably stuff at your own institution as well. So maybe your grant office is keeping an eye on you and making sure you're doing things. Usually at a state institution, they will audit you internally as well as whatever the funding agency is doing. So they want to make sure you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the in-depth part of the grants here in a second. But I brought some that I wanted to show you just so that you can take a look. I know some of you may be like, what kind of agencies do I need to be looking at? So I will tell you, in the state of Texas, the THECB, that's the Higher Ed Coordinating Board in Texas. They give a lot of funding for universities and community colleges. And the TEA, which is the Texas Education Agency, gives a lot of funding for public schools. So I have some examples of different things like that I'll show you in a second. NSF, I already mentioned them. They're big nationally, National Science Foundation. There are other ones like NIH for the National Institute of Health and stuff like that. But mainly in education, that one doesn't necessarily work for us. So for instance, here's an example of the NSF. Now this one's from 2015, so it's a little bit old, but it's the Nsf Advance Grant. This is actually one that I really want to write, and I haven't gotten to write it yet. So increasing the participation and advancement of women in academic science and engineering careers. Okay, I just think that would be awesome. I'd like to do two different ways, one with the faculty and one with students. I'd like to get some student involvement and do some training for, in particular, women in STEM, because we know that that's an area where we fall behind. But this is one that I really like. So this is just the call for the proposal, okay, for people to write grant proposals. And then there is an entire, on the NSF website, there's an entire booklet, so to speak, of here are all the things that we want to happen whenever you're looking at this grant. So it's an entire booklet's worth of stuff that you can go through and say, what are their objectives? It tells you who has been funded in the past and what their programs looked like, so that you can get an idea of those kinds of things. They'll give you all kinds of guidelines, so you can see that this is important information for stuff we want. And then there are always these due dates. So for instance, you have to write a letter of intent. Okay, we are going to submit this, and it just basically gives them a heads up that your institution is considering writing the grant. If you don't do it, it's okay, but if you do it, then if you want to write it, you have to write this letter of intent. If you don't have a letter of intent in with them, they won't even look at your proposal. Okay, so for this particular one, there's two different ways that they look at this particular grant. For this particular one, their letter of intent deadline was here, and the deadline for their full proposal was here. Okay, so about a month between those two, which is about all you're going to get to write a grant. So if you want to write a grant, you need to know exactly what it is that you're writing, what you want to do, who are your key principal people that are working with you, and that kind of thing. The next page, it gives me a synopsis of what they're looking for. You don't have to read that. I actually have one RFA that I've loaded into the website, so you can see that. But it gives me, hey, here's what we're looking for. It gives you specific differences between the different types that they've got. and it gives you web pages where you can go. Here's the site where you go to access the application and all of the details. Okay, and that's what you want to know, and that's what you're going to have to use in order to submit your proposal. Okay, so there's one from NSF. There's lots of different ones of these. Here's another big bundle of stuff that came from them about that same grant. This one's from 2014. Actually, it's the same one. It's 2014-2015. So, but this package is a lot thicker, and so it's got a lot more fine print. Activity descriptions, communication strategy. This is how you're going to talk to different people in the grant. Project management. A lot of times you have to give them a project management plan. This is who's going to be in charge of what. This is who's going to do different things. Project evaluation. This is how we're going to evaluate. So just a more in-depth version of the other thing that I showed you. Okay. There are other kinds of NSF grants. If you don't want to do women in STEM, that's okay. There's lots of stuff. So here's one that I just pulled up. Presidential Awards for Excellence in Science, Math, and Engineering Mentoring. So I believe that is ways that you can put mentoring in place, and in particular this one was for underrepresented populations. So for instance, they've got race, ethnic groups, women, persons with disabilities, and persons from disadvantaged socioeconomic groups. So sometimes they have very specific goals, and again, you want to align with them as much as you can. This one is a great little grant. We've actually gotten this one at A&M Commerce. The S-STEM, and there's also an S-STEP. And what this one is again, it's for all the STEM fields. And it allows you to put out there stipends for students, okay, to do research and to do work with you, which is really a lot of fun, working with students and getting them basically scholarships. So that's a lot of fun. Here's another one from NSF that is algebra and number theory. This one's going to be more of a pure math one. It's not going to be quite as education-y. So if you're more like, hey, I don't care about any of that, I don't want to work with students or with GAs or anything like that, then that's fine. You don't have to. You can just do one that is strictly about your field, but they're fewer and farther between to find something like algebra and number theory. So just be aware, you're probably more likely to get grants in the education area than you are in straight math. Straight math and STEM are a little more difficult. Okay, so this one's the one I mentioned earlier, the graduate assistance in areas of national need. This one is coming from, I thought it was an NSF grant. Here we go. It is not. It is the U.S. Department of Education. Okay, so there are different funding agencies. NSF is not the only way to go. In fact, I have never personally written or gotten an NSF grant, and I have over $1 million worth of funding. So, you know, it's not that you have to do NSF. I don't do them at all, because to me they're a little more technical, a little more difficult to write, and their grant proposals are really big, so I don't normally do them. But this one, the Department of Education, you know, that might be right up your alley if you're at a university and you want to fund extra graduate assistance, then there you go. I actually had a group do that one time because they were like, we want that for us. We want to be able to get our own stuff. Here is one, I believe this one was from the TEA, Texas Education Agency, and it was specifically for secondary mathematics teachers to get support. So, and it tells you who's eligible: high need local education agencies, mathematics departments of Texas, institutions of higher ed, or regional educational service centers. So, those are all the people who can apply. If you're not working at one of those places, you're not eligible for this grant. They won't let you, they'll just ignore your grant, basically. Some of them will be very specific. Some of them will say it has to be a faculty member who applies, it has to be an administrator who applies, those kinds of things. Here's another one. I actually really like these people. Institute of Education Sciences. This one was an education research grant, but I believe in particular this one was looking for technology needs. So I had a group write this one. So they didn't submit, but they did write it, and they were like, hey, we want to write this so that we can get more. I think they were actually going for iPads and Surface Pro kind of things, not like laptops. So there you go. Here's one for computing education. That one's from NSF again, but it's a STEM grant. I pulled this one out. I don't know if they do it anymore, but this was a Perkins grant, and normally those are more, I guess, civic-minded would be the thought. So, for instance, you can see this one. It's got a rip in the middle of it, but you can see this one was the following costs are allowable. Nutrition snacks for children in child care while parents are participating in your grant activities. Food necessary to conduct nutrition education programs for parents. So it's a little more geared toward civic-minded things is the way I would say that. So this one, the Perkins grant, was specifically, I believe, for nursing majors. So that one's out there. Here's one that we applied for and did receive. So Teacher Quality Grant. Okay. This program keeps on changing. It changes in different ways. But the Teacher Quality Grant is actually federal money, but it's being shuttled in through the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. So you can go to these different websites and see things and see what you've got. Teacher quality grants were a part of the No Child Left Behind and trying to improve the quality of instruction in public schools. So that one we actually did get, and we're funded for that. This video is starting to get a little bit long, so I'm probably going to put a pause on it and then come back and talk about the different pieces inside of one of these. I'm going to use the most recent one that I received, which was from the Texas Higher Ed Coordinating Board, and this one is the CSRM grant, or CRSM grant 2018, and I have loaded this RFA plus the 2 addendums to it that they gave out. So every time they give an addendum, you have to make sure that your program is now aligning with their program. And in another video, I'm going to start talking about this one, and I will go through the process for how we got this one, and then I'll also talk to you about, I'll leaf through it and show you different things that are important to know as you're writing grants and to make sure that you do what they want you to do. But as you're looking for an RFA, you might just go out and Google. I know there's the Bill and Melissa oh my gosh, I can't remember, Gates, the Bill and Melissa Gates Foundation, and they have different stuff for education. There's the, oh goodness, can't think of it now, it's something America. Teach America or something like that. So there's all kinds of foundations out there also that are privately run. You don't have to do something that's through public education. You can get privately funded foundation grants, and usually a lot of times those are actually even bigger, and they might give you more money, they might be for longer periods of time. So there's other agencies and things like that you can look at. And those small grants, these are all relatively large. I would say most of these grants I just showed you are $100,000 or more. The ones, though, there are small grants from Texas TCTM. So I quit writing things down, I'm sorry. There was IES. And the U.S. Department of Education, the Gates Foundation. There's TCTM, which is the Texas Council of Teachers of Math, and they have really small grants. like we're talking less than $1,000. So these might be large, but I had somebody one time who took this class as an independent study, and so they did this whole process all by themselves, this grant writing thing. And so I didn't make them, of course, do one of these larger grants. They were like, can I do this TCTM one? Absolutely. And by the way, she submitted and was funded. So she asked for stuff that she could use in her classroom, and it was manipulatives and things like that, and she was funded. It was less than $1,000, but still it was huge for her, and she was thrilled because it allowed her to have a classroom set of a couple of different manipulatives that she wouldn't have been able to have because she was working at a public school that was low socioeconomic area, and they just didn't have the money for manipulatives. So she was able to do this and get herself funded for a classroom set of a couple of different manipulatives, and then those are just hers. She's the grant director, and she can do as she sees fit. So if she changes to a different public school, she can take that money with her, or the manipulatives with her, and use them at her other school. So she just has to use them appropriately as she said she would in the grant. Alright, so there are different places. Go out and look. You might just Google these different agencies, or you might Google grant funding or something like that. But you can find them. They're out there, and those are going to be due by Thursday, so do quickly. Alright, thanks. Bye.